It's just time to get here.
Remember my name, just like Tyson,
He's sharp.
but he was short well.
I used to see him every week. I'd see him.
Good evening, welcome.
Hi there.
And welcome you this evening, all those joining online. As you notice, I am not Brother George. Brother George is out of town taking care of some family business. And we are going to have a guest speaker, Mr. Mark Griffin. He's going to be our guest speaker this evening. And I think don't have many announcements, so we're just going to cut to the chase and give Mr. Griffin the floor. Let's first of all go to the Lord in prayer and ask His blessings over this evening. Father, we come before you this evening, just thanking you for today, thanking you for the rain that's falling now. We thank you for waking us up. I mean, we're living by your grace, and we're on your time, Lord. I pray that you would just make your presence felt this evening here in this place, and to those watching over Facebook, that you would just speak to our hearts in the way we need to hear it. Only you know what we need to hear. I pray that you would use Brother Griffin, hide him behind the cross,
Amen.
that we might hear from you. In your precious and holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Brother Mark.
Thank you, Don. It's good to be with you guys and girls here at Orchard Baptist, and also for those on Facebook Live as well. Good to have you with us, watching us tonight. Brother George did give me a call, and he asked me if I could step in and fill in tonight, and I said I would. And he told me kind of where he was at in the book of Exodus. I looked at some of that, I think 21. But when I did, I looked at the amount of different things it needed in the study time, and I said, I just don't have that. So I'm going to move on to something else and share with you something else tonight. And so if you have your Bibles, if you'll turn to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 33 and verse 25. And we're going to look at a verse there that is kind of unique, I think, in a lot of ways. As you're doing that, I want you to think about a minute, and you can help me out with this. I want you to think about the word day. The word day, D-A-Y.
Mark, say 25 or 35?
Deuteronomy 33, yeah, and verse 25.
There we go.
Deuteronomy 33 and verse 25. Come on in. Think about the word day a minute. And think about all the ways we use the word day. Okay? I'm going to give you some primers, and then I'm sure you guys can think of some other ones, and you just call them out to me, and I will recall them here for the camera. When I think of day, I think about things like payday. That's an important thing. And, in the heat of the day. That's a phrase we sometimes use a lot when it's really hot. Want to avoid the heat of the day. Sometimes I think about a long day. You know, you work or something and you come home and there's more to do, and so you just say, man, it's been a long day. Vacation day. Those are good. We got to look for those. We're glad when those come, we can use them. And of course, holiday, you know, which can cover, you could go there and just go on with a lot of different days on the calendar, couldn't you? Like Independence Day, Christmas Day, Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, all those kind of different days. Okay, what are some others that come to your mind?
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day, yeah.
Birthday.
Yeah.
Arbor Day.
Arbor Day, there you go. Flag Day, right there with the
Memorial Day.
Memorial Day. Yep. Okay. All right. What about off of the calendar? Any other things?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all
I'm
right.
trying to direct. I thought
just
they
a
had
good
two
day.
back there.
A good day, yeah. Had a good day.
There you go.
All right. Any more?
Sunday.
Sunday, yeah. What?
Resurrection Day?
Resurrection Day, yeah. I know at our church, our pastor likes to use that more than he does Easter. For some reason, we still use Easter, but a lot of things in the bulletin and everything else will say Resurrection Day. Trying to get more focused on that, I guess. Going back in some of your generation, I know, a little bit further maybe, D-Day. Y'all remember D-Day? We might think about, we're coming up on May, so it's also going to be graduation day for a lot of people, right? A lot of kids.
I think Gracie would think of birthday.
Birthday, very good. Birthday, it's a good one. Wedding day, that's another one. Best day. I've heard kids say this is the best day ever. You know. Slow day. Busy day. Hard day. Off day.
Wet day.
What's that?
Wet day.
Wet day. Yeah. Rainy day. Sunny day. Weekday. In other words, we got a lot of ways we use that word, don't we? In phrases, and you could even go further if you went into songs, and you could find songs with the word day in it, correct, as well. Time is important, and how we spend our days are important. There was a gentleman that was in, I believe he was in Abraham Lincoln's cabinet, I believe at the time, and he was a very busy man. But yet he had some children, and one particular day he took his son fishing, and when he went fishing, they had the day of fishing, and they went back home, and he had taught, or he always himself wrote in his journal. He would write, or his diary, basically what that day was like, what he did, and this man was really important. It was right after the Civil War. He would go on trips over to Europe, see France, and different things. He was very important in the government, and so he wrote things in his diary about the days he had. And then he also taught his children to write things in their diary. Taught them, you write, this is just a great way to keep up with your life and time and everything. Well, after he passed away, they found his diary. And they also looked at the son's diary. And it was very interesting what each of them had on that day. The first one that the father had, he put, went fishing with son. And out beside it, he said, wasted day. Now, I don't know if he just meant, that was a wasted day because he had to stay home with his kid and do that, or maybe it was a wasted day because he didn't catch any fish. That might have been it. I don't know. Then they read the son's after he got older. Same day, a different entry. And it said, went fishing with dad. Best day ever. So interesting in how we view our days. And the Bible writes a lot about days. We're going to be looking at that tonight, talking about what's in a day. I do a lot of funerals. My area is pastoral care for First Baptist Tillman's Corner, and of course we have a lot of people, and I head that up, try to get people involved in doing ministry, pastoral care, hospital visits, funerals. And I do a lot of funerals. Did a bunch during COVID. And one of the things I try to do, if you go to a funeral, there's pretty much standard Bible passages, 1 Thessalonians 4, 23rd Psalm, and I use those, but also I'm always looking for something else that I could use, especially if I can link it to the person that has passed away. And I was looking for one for a particular lady, and her son had shared with me she had been a very busy lady in her lifetime, but then when she got sick with pulmonary fibrosis, she kind of went downhill. And normal average age, I think she was around closing in on 80 or a little bit above 80, maybe. But her son told me this. He said, Mom was just something else. He said she could work all day, come home, clean the house, make supper, and then still go to the ballpark. And at one time she was even the president of the ballpark. And he said, I just don't know how she balanced all that. I don't know how she did all that. How did she get the strength to do all that? And then I thought about her last days, and she would sometimes sleep a good bit of the day. Sometimes she would be fairly talkative, but she would try to spend it the best she could. And so I thought about that, and I said, there's a passage somewhere in the Bible, and I've heard it, but I didn't know where it was, so I had to look it up. And I said, I want to study that and just think about that and see what that would be like to kind of glean some things out of that. And I remember the passage was about strength and about days, and I said, I'm going to find that. So I did, and we came tonight to our passage, Deuteronomy 33 and verse 25. It says there, your sandals shall be iron and bronze. As your days, so shall your strength be. And that's the one I want to focus on, is that last part. As your days, so shall your strength be. And this is a blessing. It falls in Moses' final words to the people before they go in the promised land. You might remember Moses struck the rock, and he wasn't supposed to do that. So God told him, because of his disobedience, he couldn't enter the promised land, but he could go up on Mount Nebo and look into the promised land. And then after that, he would pass. But before he did that, he gave out blessings to the children of Israel, to the different tribes. And that's a very common thing. You can go back and look at the patriarchs and others, Jacob, Abraham, and that they would give a blessing on their children, especially toward death, passing on what their hopes for them, also maybe some spiritual insight as well as to what they're supposed to be like. So this is a blessing here. And if you study about Asher, they are of course one of the 12 tribes. But if you study about them in the Bible, there's not a lot about Asher, but compared to, say, Judah, which is the tribe where Jesus comes from, or Benjamin, where King Saul comes from, or some of the other tribes. But there is a little bit, and that's what I want to look at tonight, and then talk about this word day here and the strength for our days. It talks about, it talks about, as your days, so shall your strength be. In other words, to accomplish the first part of the blessing, the days, Asher must have the proper amount of strength for the days his tribe is allotted. And if you study about Asher and where they are in the tribal map of Israel, they are on the kind of the western coast by the Great Sea, and that's where they're to be. That's where they're to control that land. They would need to have, as it says in the very first part of 25, your sandals shall be iron and bronze. They would need to have a strong military, because that would be where much of the invasions would come from, would be the north. And they would be some of the first people, first tribes to face people that were coming against Israel. So that was a blessing. It was a prophecy that may you have this. May you have sandals that would be like iron and like bronze. In other words, you'd be able to stand up. And also he would be a strong place. It also talked about for him to find favor with his brothers. It was a very fertile place. They were to help their brothers by producing food and sending that to the other tribes and trading with them as well. So they were to be very important, both agriculturally and militarily as well. And of course, being close to the coast, I'm sure that fishing was a good part of their tribe as well. So we're going to talk about the importance of days. First one is, we're going to look up a couple different scriptures kind of all through the Bible tonight. But first one is, it is a God-given way of marking time. It's a God-given way of marking time. If you look in the book of Genesis, if you'll go back there to Genesis, chapter 1, and we know the story of creation. And in chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, it says, then God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. Right? And then he goes on and says, so the evening and the morning were the first day. It's kind of the first usage of that word there for day. And then if you go ahead and look at verse 14 through 19, it says, then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, which we know is the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, and which was the moon. And he made the stars also. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. So what was made on the fourth day by God?
Sun, moon, and stars.
Sun, moon, and stars, yeah. The very things that we use to keep up with our calendar and our time. You know, we have a solar calendar, which we pretty much use, that came down to us from Rome. Some people, like Israel, uses more of a lunar calendar. They go by that. But we do. We measure things in days. We talk about days. We mentioned some of that a little earlier about some of you can think about your wedding day. That was a good day. Or you can think about the day a child was born. You know, that was an exciting day for you. We measure things in days. And sometimes we think of that and we write about it, but yet we don't think about the big picture of days. You know, like how many days we've lived. Think about that a minute. I looked that up, and I'm 59. I'll be 60 in July, and I did the math on that. And so far, I've lived a little bit over 21,500 days. Now, when I look at my life like that, I go, man, how many of those days have I wasted? How many of those days did I not do what I was supposed to do? How many of those days did I do maybe more than I was supposed to do? And yet, all through those days, God has given me the strength to do what I needed to do. And that's something to be thankful for. It is a blessing in that way. It's also God alone who has complete knowledge of our days. Look at Psalms 139. And some of you are real familiar with this psalm, great psalm where David talks about how he was made and how God knows him and his plan for his life. Great passage to use for pro-life. Talk to people about, young women about the babies inside them and what God can do, how he knows that. Psalms 139 and verse 16. It says, your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. Okay, so there he says, God has written our days. He knows our days. They were written out before us, before we even had, came out of our mom's womb and started our life. The Bible says God knows our days, and they're written, and they're fashioned before us. I've always heard that growing up. Whenever you pass, a lot of the older generation, my grandmother and others would always use that phrase, well, when it's your day, God's going to take you. And I believe that with all my heart. I know we could go up here in an accident or whatever happened, not plan on that, not be heading toward death with sickness, and yet I believe with all my heart God knows that day. He knows that. He has that much foreknowledge, that much knowledge of who he has made and what's going to happen to us. And he can change that too at any time. Think about Hezekiah. Hezekiah was sick, and he prayed, oh God, please just let me live. And God sent the prophet back to him, and the prophet says, okay, God says he'll give you 15 more years. Man, what a blessing. But in some ways, I don't know if I'd want 15 years, because then I'd be counting, okay? Okay, this is the 15th year, 365 day. This must be the day I'm going to go. Might be a good thing, might not be a good thing. I don't know. But certainly a good thing to have more years, And some of you can testify to, times in your life where you thought, maybe this is it, or this was close to my life going, or someone in your family that's dear to you. And then all of a sudden, they got better, or they got an extension of life, or they nearly escaped a wreck or accident. And God blessed you with that. So he has the knowledge of our days. It is also a fact that as humans, we have a limited knowledge of our days. Look at James a minute, chapter 4, and verses 13 through 15. Another one of my favorite passages about the future. And James, of course, very practical book, and he kind of tells it like it is. If you ever want to tell somebody a good book to read, in which he just puts it just what it needs to be, right at your feet. Chapter 5 and chapter 4, verse 13 through 15.
That's what I thought.
Yep. You got it. We're getting 5. We're getting too far.
Okay.
It says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city. We will spend a year there. We will buy and sell, and we will make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. And so James says, plan. It's okay to plan. So we all do that. We should do that. But we should also know that those plans need to be prayed over and put in God's will and in His hand, and then say, if the Lord wills, this will happen. We can't boast about what is going to happen. We don't know that. We don't know where we'll be tomorrow or the next day. And I, as a preacher, pastor, I work by calendar all the time, Sunday to Sunday. That's how I measure calendar life in the church. And I'll say, well, this Sunday, there's 3 Sundays out, this is happening, whatever. And I work by that all the time, and I have to plan. I have to look and write that, but I also know in the back of my heart and head, we may not get to that Sunday.
That's right.
I have to remember that. If I don't, I don't remember the frailty that I have in this life, And I'm grateful for the 21,500 plus days I've had. I hope I make it, several thousand more. That's my aim at least, and I'll plan for that, and hopefully that's God's plan as well. And then the last one is, it is Jesus' counsel to take each day as it comes. Look in Matthew chapter 6, a great passage in the Beatitudes, which Jesus reminds people of his day who sometimes live day to day by their food, by their clothing. He reminds them not to worry, about things. And in chapter 6, verse 34, he says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. In other words, we're to take one day at a time, as the old song goes. One day at a time. And then Luke 12 is another one that speaks to this. If you want to turn over a few more pages to the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 12 and verse 25 and 26. Jesus says, and which of you by worrying can add 1 cubit to his stature? In other words, can you make yourself taller by worrying? No. If you then are not able to do the least, why are you anxious for the rest? And then he goes on, talks about the lilies and everything, how they're clothed in beauty, and God knows that, and they have their time, and so do we. Very famous verse is, of course, is seeking the kingdom of God, and everything else will be coming to you if you do that. So Jesus says, take one day at a time. Live it in that way. So we're going to try to understand this saying a little bit better by looking at Asher. It was a blessing, as I mentioned, upon Asher. Genesis 30, verse 13. If you look back there, Asher was the second born of Jacob and his wife's handmaid, Zilpah. That was Leah's handmaid. And if you remember that story, it's a crazy story where Abraham, or rather not Abraham, but Jacob is tricked into marrying the older daughter, Leah, and then he gets Rachel, and he has to work 14 years for him. And then all of a sudden they kind of go into this competition to see if they can get Jacob to love them more. And so Rachel can't have any children, she's barren. All of a sudden Leah has children, then Leah can't have children. Rachel gives her handmaids, they have children, Leah gives her handmaids. Jacob must have been one tired guy to deal with all that. But I could tell you, one wife is plenty, and I'm sure she feels the same way about me, one husband being plenty. But they're having kids right back and forth. And of course, we know God is using that. They're going to be the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons and leaders of Israel, and a couple of daughters as well. And so Asher is one of those. And they would name their kid different things. Asher actually meant happy. And because she said, after this many kids, surely now, my husband will love me as much as he does Rachel. He always favored Rachel, though, but at least she felt a little bit better in Jacob's eyes. And then Jacob, whenever he gave his blessing upon Asher, in 49:20 of Genesis, he says, his bread will be rich and shall yield food for kings. And Again, that statement about where he'll live and the agricultural area on the coast there of Israel, that would be where the tribes would get a lot of their agriculture at and done. And then Deuteronomy, if you go back to kind of near our passage, Deuteronomy chapter 27, I believe it is. Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse 13. They come to the two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and on one side they would shout blessings, and on the other side they would shout curses, to kind of remind them that when you go into the land, promised land, if you don't follow God, you don't do these things, this will happen to you. So they split the tribes, some on the mountain to say blessing, some on the mountain to say curses. And Asher was one of the ones on the mountain to say curses. In verse 13, it says, "And these shall stand on Mount Ebal to curse, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali." And then he talked about the other group that would be on the other side, and they would go back and forth saying those things to the people of Israel. And so they're mentioned there. And then in Joshua chapter 19, we're going to continue to turn a little bit further. They are entering the promised land. And in Joshua 19, verses 24 through 31, it says, talks about their land. It says, "The fifth lot came out for the tribe of the children of Asher, according to their families. And their territory included," and it names several different places, and it said it reached all the way to Mount Carmel, westward along the brook of Shihor, Libnath, and it turned southward, or rather turned toward the sunrise to Beth Dagon, and then it reached down to Zebulun, and then it goes all the way down until you get down to verse 31, where it says this was the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Asher. So there's its location mentioned on that coast, on the western northern coast of Israel. And then when you get into Judges, I won't give you this verse, but into Judges chapter 1, it talks about how many of the tribes entered the promised land and drove the people out, just like they were supposed to. But there were some tribes that didn't drive them out. One of those was Asher. Now we don't know for what reason. We don't know if the people were just hard to defeat, or if Asher didn't try hard enough, or whatever reason, they didn't do it. So they become a snare to Asher, and that continues throughout the time. And then in chapter 5, verse 17, it talks about Deborah and Barak. Remember Deborah and Barak? They were called upon to lead the children of Israel, and Deborah became one of the judges, even though it was supposed to be Barak. And matter of fact, she then tells him, "If you let me lead today, a woman's going to get the glory for this, and not a man, not as usual a captain of the army." And he said, "I want you to go with me, because I know you speak to God, and God speaks to you, and I want your spiritual blessing." And so he does, and they call on the tribes to come and help them. And several of the tribes are listed that come to help him, but Asher, it said, was too busy. It talks about him being on the coast, being with ships or different things, and he didn't come. And so he let his brothers down in that way. And then a little later, though, he does come to the defense of Gideon. When Gideon asked for some of the tribes, Asher does come and help them. There is one good note in the Old Testament about Asher, and it's from 2 Chronicles 30:11. In that passage, it tells us of how the tribe of Asher, as a northern tribe now, accepted an invitation from King Hezekiah of Judah to come to the southern kingdom and to attend the Passover in Jerusalem. And of course, when that division happened, there were a lot of those northern tribes that they wouldn't come down to the southern, up to Judah or that area. And they wouldn't come to the Passover. They said, "No, we'll celebrate it up in our own country." But Asher was one that still recognized Jerusalem, still recognized where the temple was and the importance of the Passover. So they came down and were a part of that. So that's just a kind of a look at Asher's days. They were days that were exciting, and there were days that were tough. There were days that where they should have answered the call to do something, but they didn't. There were days when they did help out their brothers and their tribe members. And there were days when they worshiped God and they came to the Passover, as we saw here as well. Now, we know that was Asher's life, but let's look at Moses. Moses was the man saying this. So let's think about Moses. Look at Deuteronomy 34 and verses 5 through 8. And of course, Moses is the one saying this, and I think he's the one that also probably experienced it as well. 34 is about Moses passing away. And in verse 5 it says, "So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows his grave to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not dim, nor his natural vigor diminished. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses ended." And then it talks about Joshua picking up, the leadership. But look at the description of Moses. He was a pretty healthy guy, even at 120. It says his eyes were not dim. Man, mine started going into my 40s. And I had to go get readers just to be able to see the little print. And it says that his vigor, his natural vigor wasn't diminished. He could still move and step and go. And again, I'm in my 50s and my knees have arthritis. And it's hard to get about as much as I need to sometimes. But Moses, God had blessed with the strength for his days. As he had days, he had the strength to live those out. Now think about some of Moses' days. I'm going to throw them out to you, and I want you to tell me what you think that day, if in one word, like we talked about earlier, sad day, happy day, whatever, what it would be. The day of his birth. Probably be a happy day, maybe a little bit of a scary day too, because remember what was going on? The Egyptians were killing the baby boys. So imagine that mom was happy, mom and dad, but also maybe like, oh, we better hide him quick. The day he was put in that basket on the Nile River. Sad day for mom and for sister. But happy day for him because he's being rescued, right? By the queen, or the Pharaoh's daughter, rather. Scary day, too. Nile has crocodiles in it, so it's probably a scary day as well. What about the day that the days he grew up in the palace? Probably fun days. Probably a lot of learning of the Egyptian culture and things like that. He was probably treated well, like a prince, almost. The day he killed an Egyptian. Sad. Angry. Yeah, he was angry at what they were doing to the Hebrews. And he'd already begun to learn probably some of that from his mom when she babysat him and took care of him. The day he had to leave Egypt. That was probably a sad day. Where am I going? What's going to happen to my life? And out he goes to the wilderness and to a place where he could, get a job being a shepherd. The day he met his wife, Zipporah, he landed a job being a shepherd with his father-in-law. That's a good day. That's a good day for sure. And then, what about the day that he saw the burning bush and was called by God? Scary day.
Awesome day.
All day. An awesome day.
Yeah.
Looking back, it was an awesome day.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was like, what? This bush is on fire and it's talking to me? I don't know about that. And you want me to go down and face the Pharaoh? I'm a wanted man. I can't do that. So yeah, it was a fearful day, I think, and an awesome day in a lot of ways. What about the day he performed a plague against Pharaoh? Miraculous day, right? When he did all those plagues. I imagine, he knew God was with him, but to just see it happen as he did it. Raise his staff and all of a sudden there's frogs everywhere. That had to be a powerful day for him. The day he had to put up with the children of Israel complaining. Frustrating day. Miserable day. Yeah. They were doing that all the time. If you read that story, and I know y'all are reading through Exodus now, you're hearing that all the time. Give us, we want something beside manna. We want this, we want that. Why don't you lead us out of Egypt? We'd rather be slaves. Definitely frustrated. The day when he disobeyed God and he struck the rock.
He was kind of mad.
Yeah, kind of a mad day, kind of a sad day. just a kind of mixture there. The day when he got to see the promised land. That was probably a good day.
Good day.
Yeah, when he got to look out there and say, this is what we've all been working for. This is where I've led you to. This has been in the making 400 years since you've been in slavery. And here we are. Even if I don't get to go in, it's got to be a good day.
All that grief, all that time,
Yeah,
and you don't get to go in.
and don't get to go in.
One mistake.
One mistake. I don't know, for me now, that would be tough. I'd have to maybe let him slide, but I'm not God. So God's the one who does the judging and the measuring, not me.
Thank God.
And then the day he died and was buried by the Lord.
Glorious. Great.
Glorious day, a peaceful day. Can you imagine that? I mean, being buried by the Lord. Who knows what that funeral was like? There's probably angels everywhere and all kind of stuff going on. But that's what happened. And then very mysterious. We don't know where that is. We don't know where God buried him. Nobody knows. So Moses knew what it was like to have strength for his days. We know that. And he blesses Asher with that and says, I hope God gives you strength for your days. He can do it if you trust him. And you let him do that in your life. It was also a promise and a praise, I think, in the life of Paul. If you looked in 2 Corinthians 11, 22 through 28, he talks about all his different experiences and his days. Sometimes he had good days where he traveled and did missionary journeys and won people to Christ. Some days he was shipwrecked. Some days he didn't have enough clothes or enough food. And he learned that God had promised he was going to be with him. He also learned to praise God for that. He praised God in chapter 12 of 2 Corinthians 8 through 10, where he says, okay, if you won't take this away from me, God, then you've got, your grace is sufficient. And I'm going to lean on your grace. And I'm going to be stronger even in my weakness because your grace is with me. And so that stands out. And then Philippians 4, 12, 13 is that passage that talks about, I've learned how to live not having anything. I've learned how to live having a lot. And then that famous verse in 13, I can do what? All things, right, through Christ who strengthens me. So Paul had learned that lesson that Moses had blessed Asher with years and years ago. And then also it was a testimony in the life of Anna. I do want you to look at this one. Look at Luke chapter 2. And you might remember Anna. She was in the Christmas story. And she was a prophetess at the temple. And she came and blessed Jesus and was allowed to see him. Her and Simeon as well. But in verse 36 of chapter 2 of Luke, it says, now there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, and listen to this, of the tribe of what? Asher. How about that? She was of a great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. And this woman was a widow of about 84 years. So there's some different ways people do the math there, but if you kind of read it on the surface like I do, and I'm not great at math, we were talking about that earlier, I basically, she's around, 91, somewhere in that age, if that's the case. Or maybe, more than that, probably more, somewhere between 91 and 100. And this woman was a widow, and it talks about she served, who did not depart from the temple, but she served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And coming in that instant, she gave thanks to the Lord, and she spoke of him to all those who looked for redemption in Jerusalem. Wow, what a moment. We don't know what else happened in her life other than that she was widowed. That had to be hard for a very long time. But here she has this one opportunity of seeing the Savior, seeing Jesus as a baby brought into the temple, because she was diligent to serve there day and night with the strength that God had given her for the days that she had allotted. So, very beautiful, beautiful passage there. And then, last one is, it should be a daily prayer of the believer. Matthew 6:11, which you're familiar with, I know, is the Lord's Prayer, or the model prayer. And what does he say there? He says, give us what? This day, our daily bread. Give us our daily bread. We're to pray for things in the future, but we're really to focus on the day. And I know we think about food here, but really it can be a bigger concept than that. It can be our agendas, things we do, who we meet in that day. So when we get up in the morning, we should pray and we should ask God, God, I want to ask you to give me this day, whatever you want to put in it. If you have somebody for me to meet, share the gospel with, if you have something for me to learn, I want you to teach me and show me that. If you have a blessing for me, I want to receive it. If you have a hardship, I want to have you grace to handle it and to be able to go forth with it. But I need your strength for the day that I have. Very important. Then I want to close with just a story about a woman. You know her song, but you don't know maybe the name of who wrote it, and that's Mary John Wilkins. She was a pretty big country songwriter back in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. She had a tough life though. Her first husband had died in World War II, and she had since then developed a problem with depression and alcohol. She had a second marriage, and in that marriage she had a cheating husband, and she also had the death of her mother and also a close friend altogether. And she had been pretty rich because of the songs she wrote and things, but she was miserable. And she remembered how she grew up, that her dad, I think he was a minister of music at a church, and she would sing, and she loved to sing, and she sang in their choir. That's kind of how she got her start and started writing songs. And so one day when she was just as depressed as could be, thinking about leaving her husband, trying to get over the alcoholism and things of that nature, she got in her Cadillac and she just drove out in the land area around where they lived. And there she came, and she finally saw a little church, a little country church. And the story goes that she stopped there at that little country church, got out of her Cadillac with her fur coat on, headed into that little country church to see the pastor. Well, it was a tough day for the pastor because that was his first church, and that was going to be his first counselee. So that was a tough one, when you don't know, you've only been taught so much and you're not sure. So she sits down and she says, something's wrong with me. She said, I got problems. And first he looked at her and he said, well, I saw you drive up in a Cadillac and you got a fur coat. You don't look like you got money problems. And then she said, no, I don't have money problems. And so she began to tell him all the different things she had. And of course, he being pretty young to pastoring, he didn't know much to what to say. But then he finally did come up with something, and he said, have you thanked God for your days and for your problems? And she just looked at him like, thank God? What are you talking about? Nobody thanks God for problems. And then he probably went on to tell her a lot about what we shared here, the life of Paul and others. But she went home and she said, no, I haven't done that. She said, I'll try it. I've tried everything else. I've tried alcohol, tried everything else, so I'll try that. She went home and she started thanking God for her problems. And thanking God that he's with her in the midst of them and that somehow he's going to help her find a way out of them. And as she thought about that, she sat at her piano and she came up with a song that would help her in stressful days. And it's helped a lot of people in stressful days. I remember my mom would sing this all the time growing up sometime when she went through tough days. One day at a time, sweet Jesus. That's all I'm asking of you. Just give me strength to do every day what I have to do. Yesterday is gone, sweet Jesus, and tomorrow may never be mine. Lord, help me today. Show me the way, one day at a time. And it's probably one, God used a very miserable lady to write that song and to not only give her something, to help her strengthen her life and walk through her life, but to give the world something. So many people I know have sung that song, hung on to that song. It's meant a lot to them in their hard times. So tonight, think about that. Think about the fact that He wants us to pray and ask Him to give us strength for our days. Nobody knows what those are for each of us, but He wants to do that for us. So I want to encourage you to do that tonight. in this week. Let's go to the Lord in a word of prayer, and then we'll close with our Facebook audience, and then we'll look at our prayer request here. Okay? Dear God, I thank you